Right. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
I
Good
was.
morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I was continuing with the interview, and we said that there are certain factors which affect interview. Here, interviewers inferences of the interviewee's personality from the way he or she acts in the interview have a large impact on interviewers' rating that all of you are aware about. And clever interviewees attempt to manage the impression they present to persuade interviewers to view them before more favorably. Now, this happens quite a lot in the interview process, that sometimes we try and manage the process as a whole by being a little smart. And there is no harm in it if you can do that. We also find that personal characteristics like attractiveness, gender, race also affects the interview. And here interviewers tend to have a less favorable view of candidates who are physically unattracted. Sometimes if he is biased, a bit of a chauvinist, then either way, male or female candidates would be seen differently, depending on who is interviewing, male or female. Of a different racial background sometimes also leads to that. And disabled employees are also looked differently. And in Indian condition, we find that our caste also plays some kind of a role in a caste-ridden society that is there as far as the interviews are concerned. We also find that interviewers' behavior affects interviews outcome, that is inadvertently telegraphing expected answers or talking so much that applicants have no time to answer questions. There are a large number of interviewers who talk quite a lot and allow only small amount of time to the interviewees. And letting the applicant dominate the interview sometimes also results into problems. And what we find that acting more positively towards a favored or similar to the interviewer applicant is also affecting the interviews that we notice. But how to design and construct the interview, that is an art. Now, if you find that the structured situational interview is there, use either situational questions or behavioral questions that yield high criteria related validation. And therefore, in order to do this, we have got to go through the job analysis data, relate the job's main duties to the questions that you are asking, create interview questions beforehand, and if required, write it down, create benchmark answers as to questions you have written but what answer you are expecting, the benchmark answers, and appoint the interview panel and conduct interviews in detail. Just a minute. I'll just hold on for a minute. हेलो अनाश, वालेकुम अस्सलाम। असल में वकील साहब का टेलीफोन आया था, हाँ, उनको 1200 रुपए देने हैं, तो आज किसी वक्त दे दीजिए। नहीं, मुझसे ले लीजिएगा आप आके, अगर आप दे दीजिए, लेकिन मुझसे आज ही ले लीजिएगा। हाँ, तो कब आएंगे? मैं 12:10 पे आ जाइए। मैं नहीं घर पे हूँ। कोई नहीं चलो ठीक, अच्छा। Yeah, I'm sorry, there was an urgent call. Right. Then how to conduct an effective interview? That is, you need to structure your interviews, base questions on actual job duties, use job knowledge, that is situational or behaviorally oriented questions, and objective criteria to evaluate the interviewee's responses. Train interviewers. So interviewers training is required because if you do not have a trained interviewer, then questions left, right, center will be asked. Try and use the same questions with all candidates. Not that you have asked some questions to one candidate and then change the thing, or even if you are changing it, the weightage or way of asking may be differentiated. Use descriptive rating scale, that is excellent, fair, or poor, to rate answers, and use multiple interviewers or panel interviews, and if possible, use a standardized interview form, control the interview, and take brief note while conducting the interview. We also find that while preparing for interview, secure a private room to minimize interruptions. Review the candidate's application and resume beforehand, before you start the interview. Review the job's specifications, right? Job specification, if you remember when we talked about job analysis, we said that job analysis leads to job description and job specifications. Specifications pertains to the training, qualifications, personality types, etc., etc. That is what you need to review beforehand. As needed, always establish rapport, put the person at ease, ask questions, follow your list of questions that you have prepared beforehand, and don't ask questions that can be answered in yes or no. Ask them to explain the things. Now, if you follow this principle, we find that you may succeed in conducting the interview well and getting a right kind of candidate, right? Now, once we have talked about selecting a candidate, as we said, if we have got to summarize, we will say that interviews would be a preliminary interview where a screening of candidate takes place, right? In order to screen the candidate, sometimes we conduct a preliminary interview, normally conducted by the junior staff, mostly in the campuses, and in order to shortlist the candidate for another round of interviews. Now, the advantage of junior staff conducting a preliminary interview is that the cost would be less, as senior persons do not have that much of time. But disadvantage is that because of inexperience, sometimes good candidates are being screened off in the preliminary interview, right? We also sometimes call it a screening interview rather than preliminary interview. Then we find that the interviews would be called a detailed interview, in a detailed interview, anything and everything can be asked, right? And it can be conducted by a panel, it can be conducted by individual, or whatever the interviewer decides upon. Then there is an interview called pattern interview, in which questions are written in a particular sequence, and the panel would ask questions that they have in a particular sequence that is there. One person would be asking first, followed by another, and the questions are also sequential. There would be direct and indirect questions which are there. A stress interview we have already seen in detail as to what it is. Now, once you have gone through the interview process.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, are you trying to show the slides?
No, not yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Then what happens that once you have interviewed the candidates, you have shortlisted them on the merit that you have assigned. We try and prepare a list of people who we want and issue them a letter which is basically, in terms of law of contract, is an invitation to join the organization. Up till now, law of contract was not operating. As we shortlist the candidates, the organization makes an offer that if you have qualified the interview and we offer you a job, that is the job contract, on the following terms and conditions. The terms and conditions are written in detail. That will be the salary they are writing, the timings that you are supposed to observe, the location where you are going to go. So every detail is being given, including the leaves, etc., etc. And if they further say that if you agree to the terms and conditions, you may sign in return the letter, or approach the organization on such and such date to join. That is there. Once you join, that means as per law of contract, you have accepted the contract. You have signed a contract now with the organization by joining on the terms and conditions given, right? Once you have joined the organization, what will happen? You are supposed to work. You have got to perform. But if you are directly from the campuses, or if you are new to the job, will you straight away start performing? Answer is you may or you may not. But in large number of cases, training is being provided to these individuals. Training which is necessary for every individual that when they are joining the organizations, right? So what we will do, or we will look at a training part that is there. Training that has to be imparted to the individuals. Pardon, what is happening? I don't know. There is some problem. Okay. Saying stop sharing. New window. Right. Is anything visible on the screen?
Not right
Yes, sir.
now.
No, the slide is
Visible now.
visible, sir. The slide is visible, but the text is not.
No, text will come. Text will come, don't worry.
Attendance not
Now here we are talking about training, basically. Look at the definition. Training is a process through which an employee develops the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform a job, right? This is how we define training in terms of training at the organization level. While you are going to work for an organization, this is the definition of training. Training would have different meaning in different contexts, right? The second thing that we look at is a term called development. Development is a process that provides growth opportunities to learn beyond essential competencies to build individual and organizational effectiveness. I repeat this. Development is the process that provides growth opportunities. Now, once you talk about growth opportunities, it is going to be long-term effect. to learn beyond essential competencies to build individual and organizational effectiveness. So development is not for the present only, it's not reactive, it is a proactive approach where, keeping future in mind, you are trying to build up competencies, right? Then what is training? See, if you look at the word training in English, we say it is noun, meaning activity leading to skilled behavior. Now, I experienced that in past, some people consider that training is a verb. No, training is a noun, meaning activity leading to skilled behavior. It is synonymous with grooming or preparation, or both. Grooming for what? Grooming to perform the job. Preparing for what? Preparing to perform the job. Now, training traditionally refers to what many people would term professional development. So training leads to professional development, right? Training and development is the field concerned with workplace learning to improve performance. Mind it, you have got to remember this very, very clearly. Training and development is the field concerned with workplace learning to improve performance. That is going to be discussed in this class. I'm not going to discuss other aspects of it, right? For example, in military, training means to drill and keep in shape in case of deployment orders. That is same as exercise, only it is for military units, it is not for others, right? There is some problem. I'll do that once again. No, there's some problem with the transparency. I'll get back. Sharing it now. Yeah. Right. Yeah, here we go. Right. So what we say is that training is a process through which an employee develops knowledge, skill, and attitude, and development that we have already defined. We have already said that it is a noun, and the meaning and other things that we have seen, the synonymous part of it. We also said that it refers to professional development. It is for the workplace learning that we talked about, and we have talked about in military what it means, right? It is widely recognized that training is a powerful instrument for improving staff productivity through development of people. But what is not appreciated is that training is a scientific field, and like any other scientific activity, requires or demands exactitude of operation like sciences, right? But we consider this as an ad hoc kind of a thing, that annual, ritual can be performed as far as this training is concerned. That is what we have been perceiving. And therefore, we find that in majority of cases, as you know, if had pandemic not been there, or even during the pandemic, we find that online training is being organized mostly during the month of January and February, so that budget can be exhausted. That is there, because after March, a new budget year will come, and whatever money is left is spent on training. In the 21st century that we are through, education and skills of the workforce will end up being the dominant competitive weapon. This is what a scientist called, a management scientist called Lester Thurow has got to say, right? He said it in the last century. First, the 21st century, the education and skill of workforce will end up being the dominant competitive weapon. So he's saying it is of strategic advantage to the organizations. Now there are two options that is available. The options for the employee. Organization can buy skills through hiring. This is one option. Persons are already trained and you pay higher prices and get them from the market. Or you develop skill through training and development activities. Both are being followed by the organizations. But the first option is very, very expensive proposition, and therefore, and may not 100% suit with the organization's requirement. Therefore, the second option is there, and we find that we normally adhere to the second option. We find that as far as data for investment in training is concerned, way back in 1995, US organizations spent approximately $52.2 billion on formal training and development. That was the industry report. And in 2005, we got data. This figure almost tripled. It was $150 billion were about spent on the training, but we don't have data for the present. We find that in UK, we do not have the investment figure, but what we find that, on an average, an employee spends about 15 to 20 days on training every year, right? But if you compare that with India, what we find that we have got an average of 5 days training in the entire career of an employee. That means there are a large number of employees who get more number of days of training, maybe a month or 2 or 3 in the lifetime. But there are a large number of employees who do not get training at all as far as the organizations are concerned. So such is the philosophy in India. Now, any trainer would face one question that they have got to answer. And they have got to answer that question to themselves. What is the purpose of training? Is it for any use? Or it is just that it is a ritual? Is it worth? Now, these are some of the questions that the trainer must ask themselves. And if the trainer believes that there is enormous value in training, the belief must be backed by hard facts or observable differences that is created by training input. And a belief in training without this data is blind. And therefore, what we find that it can be easily toppled, that why should we provide training? See, what we find that if you look at any business person, every penny that they spend, they consider that as an investment. Do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Even when you go to any shop to buy certain things, say clothing or anything, and they say, would you like to have tea or coffee? They don't say, would you like to have tea? They say, would you like to have tea or coffee? That means it is for granted that you are going to have it. That is what they presume. And they want you to spend some time in the shops or in the establishment, and you be obliged to buy things from there. That is the investment that they are trying to make. That they will show you things. If you don't like one, they will show you another, so on and so forth, and try and persuade you to buy. They will become aggressive seller for that context. Although they were courteous to offer you tea or coffee, but while they have already offered you, they will start showing the goods that you want. They would try and indirectly force you to buy things from their establishment. So when any other businessman, he is spending money on training, you think that he is going to consider this just as an expense, or will he consider this as an investment? Now, if it is an investment, as we say, it has to be an investment because they will not spend it, then they would see as to how much return are they going to get. Now, if the training is not giving them observable difference in terms of the sales, if it is not giving them observable difference in terms of performance on the production line, in terms of quality of products that you are producing, in terms of number of units that you are producing, in terms of your working in the Department of Finance or Operations, they will not spend any money on training. Therefore, we must try and see that it is an investment, not a ritualistic kind of expenses that they have got to make. The impact of training or the lack of it is visible all around us. Now, it is in our culture, we seem to protest only when we are affected. It indicates a gross shortage. Now, I would ask you to read the last paragraph that is shown on the transparency very, very clearly. We seem to protest only when we are affected. It indicates a gross shortage. I'm giving you an example for this. An example which is not directly industrial training. Now, of training competencies across entire training spectrum, starting from nursery to leadership, development programs for top management of organization, we observe this. I will not read. You read it. I'll give you a minute to read it. Yes, some of you would have observed it, seen it, some of you would have experienced it. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Some
Yes,
of
sir.
you would have seen it, some observed it, or some of you have experienced it. Now, why does it happen? Why does it happen? Because most of us have got vehicles which is having papers, registration, RC, that
Yes.
we do have, insurance papers, we do have the licenses for driving, but we do not carry it until we have encountered it, until we have got to pay a hefty fine for that. Or today, we know that Corona is all around. It is affecting us. Mask is a compulsory thing, but we were not wearing it. Why? Because there was no fine. Now that we have got, some places has got fines of 500 of 1,000 rupees, and somewhere your vehicles are being impounded, we start observing. But before that, we were not observing. Why? Are we not afraid of our life? Answer is, we do it once we are affected. If somebody in the family has already experienced it, either you have got to spend large amount of money to save them, or the person is no more, God forbid, then we start practicing it. Otherwise, we don't. So that is there. Why is it happening? Perhaps our perspectives as a trainer are skewed. We as trainers have defined ourselves too narrowly. For example, in the school, we develop the competencies of children in the area of writing, communicating, general knowledge, and mathematical ability. Why? Because we want our siblings or children to be able to write, speak, calculate, and in addition to being aware of who the President of India is, right? We want them to win prizes, get 100% in mathematics, win all the debates, get 100% in the exams. But what about the ability to distinguish between right and wrong? What about directions in life? What about the development of instinct of sharing and for fighting for what is right? What about the instinct towards self-respect? What about instinct towards freedom, say freedom of expression? Though freedom of expression is enshrined in our constitution, there are a few among us who are able to stand up for what we think is right. Most people grovel in front of power, right? Now this power can be muscle power, this power can be, any other kind of power that is there. So we do not speak. Why? Why it is? And that is why we find that lots of crime is there. We find that lots of incidents are happening in and around us. This indicates a shortcoming of the trainer as well as the training process, that is, people have been exposed to during their lifetimes. No wonder there are few students who aspire to be entrepreneurs, very few of them. Aspiration for job where one does not have to stretch oneself to achieve, in addition to unaccountable exercise of power, is very, very high in society. Now we need to shift ourselves, our perspective, from the development of purely functional competencies to behavioral competencies. So when I'm talking about training, I'm not only talking about training in terms of acquiring skill, we are also talking about training in terms of behavioral skill, behavioral competencies, and therefore lifestyle development, perception expansion, as well as orientation development about should be part of a training exercise, not just the functional competencies. Now I'll ask you to read.
So, I would just like to state something that I have interacted with children of growing age who have this intuition of what is right and what is wrong, and they really want to act on it. But if they are doing it, then they are somehow termed as rebellious kids or as kids who do not respect their elders or do not listen to them.
That
So
is
how
what
is it?
it is shortcoming of the parents, parents
Yes,
training
sir.
is not there.
So it's not
Yes,
just with, like, we have experienced that in our lives. Whenever we try to protest against something, we are always told that you are actually overthinking or you're just wrong in your opinion. We have been told that in our life as well.
That is what is there, because in past we had been old fashioned in thinking, right? Now read
yes,
this,
sir. Right.
read this paragraph, read this paragraph. Right? I've quoted, Bhagavad Gita, and we're saying that Arjun's competency.
Sir, may I add something?
Yes, you can add.
Sir, if a child protesting for chocolate, then sir, what about it?
Convince them. Convince them why you are not offering chocolate. Because it is going to
But,
spoil their teeth. It is going to spoil their health. You have got
But
to make them
sometimes
understand.
this decision is wrong for the child, but for his health, it is important to take this decision.
Yes, it is. You have got to take a decision to protect the health of the person in a long run. I tell you one thing. Today, at home, our siblings, our children, if they are small, and we are sitting and talking or doing anything, if they are coming and asking us anything, they want to be involved, what do? We give them mobile and say, go and play on the side. Are we doing right thing?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
There is a problem with us. So we are talking about our training in turn, which will be reflected in the training of our children, right? So what we are saying here in this particular, slide, we are referring to the war, right? Called Mahabharat. Now, if you have seen that serial which was being picturized, it is the Arjun. We know that he was one of the greatest warriors. He was the greatest archer. Arguably, he was the greatest archer if Eklavya is to be kept aside, right? Although some people say Eklavya was there, the greatest, but his finger was being taken by the guru of Arjun, right? So we are not going into that debate, but he was the greatest archer we have known as far as mythology goes. I'll not say history goes. Now, what happened that when he went to the war with Krishna, the first weapon he took out was Brahmastra. Now, Brahmastra by definition is a weapon of mass destruction. So that was to destroy humanity. And therefore, once he take out that Brahmastra to fire, Krishna was there to stop him, right? He said, no, you may be highly competent, functionally competent, but you cannot use Brahmastra as the first weapon choice. And therefore, he asked him to use a smaller impact weapons rather than using Brahmastra. So that is where, because you have no right, whatever actions that you are taking, you may be highly competent, and therefore you feel that everything is done. You do require that morality. You do require that, behavioral competency which was required, which was imparted to them, thankfully, by Krishna. That is being mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Now, so what we are saying that without orientation, without functional competencies, it can have negative results. If Krishna was not there, then we find that Arjuna would have fired that weapon and destroyed and killed large number of people in society, right? So training.
So the same would be said in case of Achilles. Achilles is one of the greatest Greek warriors during Trojan War. So he was a very competent warrior, and what he knew was how to do war and how to win a war. But he was always on the side of money, always on the side of power. And by the time he realized the distinction between right and wrong, he had already lost his life.
See, I am not taking example from outside since we all have a mythology in India. Therefore, I have taken Gita for that purpose. Okay. Why is there a rising incidence of children of well-to-do families taking to crime? Lots of them are doing it. I'm not saying all, but many. Why? Because they are too much focused on the development of functional competencies and their assessment through exams, and too little or no focus on orientation and lifestyle development. There is a problem in our education system itself that we have. We are trainers. We as a trainer have not synthesized the key parameters of historic development, holistic development. We have trapped ourselves into thinking about functional competency only. Too selfish approach that we have followed, right? And therefore, what we find that we need to have, we need to know why the training is needed. Why training is needed? Have you thought about it? Why training is needed? Right. I'll stop here for today. I'll continue with the need for formal training and other things on the next time. Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you,
here.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So,
So,
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, can you please share these slides, sir, for our revision purpose
Yeah,
and fixing some?
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Thank you
I'll
so
try
much.
and do it as soon as possible.
Okay, sir. Sir,
We'll have to
and any book for sir exams like NET, etc.
I said you go through a book by